Welcome back to another episode of the Profit Builder Unscripted. Today's guests are a couple of contractors who I've worked with for a while, sharing their story about how did they go from struggling to make a consistent profit to exceeding their goals, and what were the two things that they have done that have been the difference that's made the difference in their business and in their lives. All right, let's jump in. Today, my guests are Susan Williams and Tessa Springer with Aesthete Painting, and they've just got such a great story to share, and I think you're just going to get a lot of value out of what they have to say. So before I jump in and we start talking, Tessa and Susan, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being a guest on the Profit Builder Unscripted.
So we're a painting contracting and wall covering contracting business, and we've been in San Francisco Bay Area, and we've been in the business of painting and wall covering for probably over at least with the business Aesthete Incorporated and all that, probably close to 30 years, 28 maybe.
Okay.
And just going strong right now since we've been working with Vicki.
You guys are doing awesome. Well, part of why, so thank you for that. Part of why I asked you to be a guest on here is there was this moment a few months ago when we were meeting and talking, and we were looking at your financials, and it was like there was this moment of, oh my gosh, you've exceeded your goals. And not only did you meet them, but you exceeded your goals. And it was just very apparent to me that where you are today in your business is very different than you were 4 years ago when we first met and started working together. And this isn't about like, what did I do to make your business different? Really, what this is about is there's something that's different about who you are and how you run your business now than is then. And my question to you is, what do you feel like is the thing that's different that's allowed you to be able to meet your goals, exceed your goals? What's the thing that has you? Because then we all got into this conversation too about like, how are you feeling about your business and your lives? And y'all went on about like how different your experience is, not just in terms of the numbers and the results, but your experience of being in your business. So I guess my first question is, maybe you could even just start by sharing what's the thing that is different about how you run your business now that you feel is the thing that's allowed you to cause such a different experience in your business?
Right. So I have to say for myself, the sense of confidence and surety that I have is pretty mind-blowing. I knew I had talent, I knew I had experience, I knew I had fortitude, I knew I had a lot of things inside of me, but based upon how I feel now, it seems like all those, you know, qualities were latent in comparison to where I am now. I wake up every morning and I feel so much better about where I am, just mentally, emotionally about my business. I feel like I've really grasped the challenge of making it work better and stronger each and every day. I am more connected to what I do in a different kind of way altogether, in the sense that I have goals that I set with Susan, I set with you monthly, and so on and so forth. And as you spoke about us exceeding our goals in our business, I mean, that was amazing. Once we went through the numbers and we saw that the trajectory was looking so awesome. I mean, I just felt so strengthened in, what we're doing, what we continue to do. And, I just feel so much more confident in so many ways. I think that's the word for me today.
What do you think it is that's given you more confidence?
Basically, just knowing what I'm doing and what I'm supposed to do in order to get from point A to point B. For example, just using our backlog report and knowing what how much revenues are required, what we have to sell each month, and in order to meet our goals. And that alone has really sort of given me a path forward. It's like my GPS, point A to point B. It's easy. You take this route and you'll arrive there in this amount of time, right? If you're driving from one place to the next. So for me, that has been immeasurable.
Can you just speak a little bit more about, because there's people who are listening who we know what a backlog report is.
Okay.
Can you just extrapolate a little bit about it? Because it's part of what you're saying is it lets you see where you're headed, right?
Exactly.
The whole thing of you got a
Right.
GPS, right? Like you have a place where you're headed. But can maybe, so first of all, backlog report is what's in contract. So when we use that word, right, it's backlog. What do I have in contract that's signed, that's yet to be billed?
Right.
And when you use that report, so it lets you compare budget, what's your budget goal by month. So first of all, you have budget goals that you're comparing. All right, how much do I have in contract that I'm going to bill compared to that budget revenue goal, and how much
Right.
am I off? So can you speak to like, how does having that information help you make different or better decisions? Like, what do you like? So it's good to be able to see it, right? Like, because sometimes I think the whole thing of sometimes we don't want to look at information because we don't like what it has to say.
Right.
To be able to like it, I always think like it takes courage to be able to go, first of all, I put a stake in the ground about how much I want to bill in terms of revenue, but then to look at how am I doing compared to how I said I wanted to be doing takes courage, because sometimes what that means is facing a picture that we don't necessarily like. And then sometimes I think that it actually, that fear of I'm not going to make my goals keeps us from even setting goals. So
Right.
can you just talk, and we'll talk a little bit more, I know, about setting goals in a little bit. I suspect that's going to be part of our conversation. But when you look at that backlog report and you can see that gap, can you just talk a little bit about how you look at it and what decisions, how does it help you make decisions or take action in a way that is something other than, oh, I'm not making my goals. Like
Right.
there's a mindset that you have about it, and there's something that you do with that. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I like that word mindset because so much of having your own business is a mindset, right? So the backlog report is almost like the foundation, the physical foundation that complements, a changing mindset or a growing mindset. So for me, when I tackle filling out the backlog report, I actually like seeing all the previous month's accomplishments. I don't like erasing them. I like seeing them because it shows me each step that I've taken with Susan in this business to create that backlog report, which basically is, like you said, what we have in the pipeline under contract, what we're 90 something percent working on that we're likely to get, right? That helps with my mindset because it helps me drive that business even more to get it under contract. And then the third part of the backlog report is stuff that you're working on, like it's 50-50, but you've got some more work to do with that client or whatever have you. So having all that information gives me direction, right? I know how much time I need to spend filling that pipeline for the next 6 months, the next year, so on and so forth. I know that I have to do some cold calling. I have to do some marketing. All these things are initiated by that backlog report because it's black and white. The numbers don't lie. If
So
my goal was,
go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so if my goal for, let's say, next month in November is $200,000 and I am short, I know I have to be proactive and fill that month. Otherwise, I'm going to fall short of my goal. And I am really serious about my goals because those goals mean success. Those goals mean I can expand my business. I can have additional support here in the office, hire someone to support Susan and I here in the office. I can purchase a new vehicle. There's so many things that fulfilling that goal means in expanding our business. So that backlog report is almost like my, my daily, look, see where I'm at.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you just said there too, because it's so interesting because I always think if there's like, if we can keep it super simple, right? And like, what are the most simple things that let us look from 30,000 feet?
Right.
That if we manage something like a backlog report, that if I love what you just said, if I meet those targets, those revenue targets, and I bring my projects in on margin and all that, like, but if you meet those targets, that's the first thing, that when you're paying attention to it all the time, you know that all the rest of the things that you're planning for, or want to do in your business or growing your business is dependent on doing that. So I love
Correct.
that, first of all. And second of all, that like what you said, which I think is really important. It's like, I look at November and I go, I'm short in November. I've got to fill that gap. The other thing would you say that this is true is it sort of takes it out of the realm of, I just gotta I gotta sell more. I gotta sell more. I gotta sell more to in the next 2 months, I need to sell this much and I need to sell
Yeah.
this much.
Yeah.
Now I'm much more focused on then looking at like, all right, like who's a potential, is there a change order? Is there somebody who is on the fence that I can bring, I can get them over the fence, somebody who's said yes for later that maybe I can move up, all those different things. You now are in a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, well, I'm guessing that's part of what brings you a peace of mind is that now it's not this big overwhelming thing. Yeah, that it's just a smaller chunk. Would you say that
Yeah.
that's true?
I think for myself, it's and just piggybacking on what Tessa said, really it's like very clarifying. It's like a clarification of all of the information and all of the elements that go into, creating the work, getting the work, planning for the work, planning for the income that's going to come in from the work. And that's also part of the budget, but the backlog really, that is something that we're interacting with more regularly. And that is the roadmap. I mean, to have that in a more structured format, I think if I could say three things about what that creates is it creates structure for us in regards to planning and how we're perceiving what we have rather than having everything up here and going, well,
Can you just speak a little bit more about planning? Because I'm hearing the nuance of what you're talking about right now, but can you just expand on that a little bit when you say
so the
planning.
So the planning and the organizing around scheduling, manpower, when things are coming in, when things are winding down, when other projects, how all of that, when projects are overlapping. So it really is such an amazing organizational tool as well. It helps us budget. It helps us really get a picture of what, how much is going to be coming in from those projects and when we can bill for those. And so I think for me, it gets a lot of the chatter and a lot of the busyness out of my head. and it gets it in a structured form so that and it's not just a calendar. I mean, it's really structured so that we can see what are the projects that we know we have, when are we anticipating that they're coming in, what the budgets are for those projects, and when they need to be allocated out with manpower. And so it's, for me, it's just it creates less anxiety because you have a roadmap, and then you can see very clearly, what months or in what areas, like you said, that you're going to be running short or that you need to fill. So you can anticipate when you have gaps. You can anticipate, is there a chasm to fill here, right? Do we need to bring something in, or do we need to work on something a little bit more to make sure that we're solid? So I think for me, having that and being able to look at that creates it just creates a sense of it affects my mindset as well, because I know that I can have less worry about it or less questions about it, and I'm more focused about how to actually have an actionable sort of plan to deal with it. So whether that means more work or managing what is in the backlog, and how we're going to, if we need extra crew, we need to man up for things, we're ahead of the game. And so I think that's been huge. I mean, really makes a huge difference for us.
So as I'm listening to both of you, it's kind of like the difference between looking in the rear view mirror to see where I'm headed, like, which is what happens a lot of times. It's like we look and we go, how much got billed this month? Like, it's all right here. And part of what you're doing is, I'm listening to you with the backlog report, is you're like being able to see where you're headed before you get there. And it's allowing you to be proactive now about how that future is going to show up in a way that gives you more control, more peace of mind, more like you're being more proactive versus reactive to what's showing up. Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said.
So
Exactly.
cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I created this tool. I love this tool. And just how you guys just described it really is the essence of sort of its best version of itself, beyond even sometimes how I think about it. Most of the time, how I think about it, right? Like I think that what you just described is, it's that thing that lets you get elevation. It has you, when I'm listening to you, it's like it has you ask all these questions about, like, when is that job going to start, or how many people are we going to need, or how are we going to stay on schedule, how are we going to get that work done so that the next project can come on. It's like, and that it, because it's codified, because it's in writing, it makes you stop and think about it and put it down and plan for it. So I love that.
No, it's huge. And I think and everybody has a different style of learning or of absorbing information. And probably a lot of people in our industry are probably visual type, learners, or people that in that visual reference rather than just a list, or the way that it's structured. It really helps with just getting things out of your head and creating that space, and again, the clarity to just know what do we need to focus on, rather than being sort of all over the place. It helps to really narrow that down in terms of where do we need to take actions. I think
100%. And also too, it extends into all the other aspects of putting our daily, weekly, monthly business together in terms of our crews. Then that backlog report gets directly translated onto our scheduling calendar, right? That we have up on the wall. And we know how much crew, or if we need any subs, like a taper for this particular job, or we need, a special finisher for this job, we can use all that information in real time and pre-plan so that we're ahead of the game as much as we possibly can in construction, right? But at least it helps us prepare for the future down the road, even into the following year. For example, in January, we have another job that we have that's been delayed. So we know what we're going to need in January in terms of our crew size, if we're going to need any more subs, that sort of thing. So it translates directly, to these other parts of the business. That's as equally important.
Yeah.
So let me ask you guys a question, because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, all right, if I'm somebody listening to this or watching this, I might be thinking, ooh, like I wouldn't know how to begin, or like there was some transition that you went through when you first started doing this. And when I know when I introduced this it took some getting
Yes.
used to, some learning, some leaning into.
Absolutely. Yep.
What do you feel was the thing that helped you get beyond the, oh my gosh, it's something new. I have to figure this out. Like you weren't used to looking at it. Like, can you just describe what it was like when you first got introduced to this tool? And then how did you turn it into being that kind of an amazing tool? Like what were some of the things that helped you make that shift?
Well, I think for me, looking at it, just sort of like looking at the spreadsheet for the budget, our budget, the first couple of months watching, you move around in there and us filling out the spreadsheets and learning how to work within the structure of the format. It was a little bit of a learning curve for sure. And I think it was just getting used to I'll just say it was getting used to seeing the numbers and really the numbers and the organization of it. I knew right away it was going to be a powerful tool. There was times when I would be a little overwhelmed by it. Like, whoa, this is a lot of information. This is a lot of stuff we're going to need to stay on top of in the entries. But the more that we got comfortable with it, and the more, we did it, and we did it together for a while, and then I did it, and Tessa. So we've sort of traded off doing the updating on it, and I think that's good. We got excited about it pretty quickly
Yeah.
because we could see what a great organizational tool it was. But I think it took us a few months to really start to get comfortable with it and wrap our heads around it and not see it as, oh, we're going to have another meeting with Vicky. We have to hurry up and get this, like, we have to get this, filled in so we're ready. That happened pretty quickly because once we started filling it in and being ready, we recognized, how powerful it was really in terms of us seeing in real time where we were at. And it wasn't, I'll tell you the other thing that happened for me. It really eliminated the emotional charge and trigger around the anxiety around the work, are we meeting our goals? What are our goals? The numbers, really looking at the numbers. I think that was something Tess and I both wanted to get more comfortable with, but we were kind of terrified about it. And it was a dynamic between us that we had to really get past. And these tools that you've provided for us, both the budget and the backlog report, really helped to sort of decompress the emotional charge and trigger around sometimes the difficulty or just the mindset of facing things, looking at it head on, and really just saying, this is the deal. This is where we're at. This is like a numbers thing. There's no emotion here. This is going to tell us the truth. And there's something about truth, right? The lies will kill you, right? Truth hurts, but the lies will kill you. And that right there, just being able to like feel like we're being honest and clear, and we're facing our business, and we're facing the difficulties around the things that both together and individually that we felt a little intimidated about, I think have just become way less intimidating, way more user friendly. I still get a little overwhelmed at times around some of it, but mostly it's just feels like a good friend. Like really.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let me ask you guys a question, and then I want to talk about budget, because I know that you've shared that the budget and this backlog report have really been two key things. If somebody's listening to this and they're like, all right, maybe I should do that. Like, if you were to give them, each of you, just a brief piece of advice about getting started, what would you say to them?
Getting started. Well, personally, I had to recognize, first of all, that I needed help to cross those barriers and hurdles within myself. I know I had the competence to do great things in my business, but I didn't know how to get there. So the first thing I think in life is realizing if you want to accomplish something, like if you want to learn to play the piano, you get a teacher, right? Whether that's an online thing, if that's your thing, or you go to a class, or you have a teacher come to your home, you get help. And so asking for help starts the process. And then you find the helper, right? So we found you. And then we had to embrace the help, right? And even though at times the help didn't make sense to me, I was like, okay, I'll go a little further. I'll expand myself a little further until it started to make sense and more sense. And then something happened where I was like, wow, this is amazing. I feel better. My business is doing better. I feel more confident. I'm able to speak to my clients in a more direct way. I started valuing myself and the work that I was putting out there more. So many things happened simultaneously. And it's amazing how just your coaching, for instance, because it's just not, for anyone who's listening, it's just not about the backlog report and knowing your numbers. It's all the other stuff that comes along with that, right? Because we are people and we bring ourselves to our business. We don't just bring numbers or a contract to a client. We bring our personalities to a client. And so that confidence, for instance, that I'm speaking about today, and that sense of value in, my experience and the quality of work that we're committed to delivering is what I bring now with so much more ease, because I know what I have to do. I know I know the numbers, I know how I have to get there. So therefore I bring myself there saying, this is what we are offering. This is what Aesthete is offering. And this is how much it costs. And here's why it costs this much. And this is why you're going to be so happy at the end of this project, because this is the value that I'm going to bring, to you. So, I think so just to summarize, getting the help you need is important, embracing the help, and running with it, and you'll get where you need to go.
Yeah. And I think what happens is, like with anything that you start new, it's, you get to a place in your business, and it happens more than once as you're growing. And I think it's just the growing pains, right? Where you kind of get stuck, or you hit a place of sort of resistance, or where you feel like, okay, I've made it to this point, however I did, sometimes I wonder, how did we? But we did, because we're smart, and we're motivated, and we have a lot of things a lot of strengths. But like anything, you get to a place and it's like, we need to get to the next level. We need to level up. How do we do that? Like, what is missing here? And I think the thing that you provided, aside from the structure, which was huge, and we're an organized business, but the structure that you provided was some of the other things that you have, the budget, the backlog, and other things that I think created a cohesiveness, and it gave us another place to kind of up level and not have to reinvent the wheel all alone on and just kind of try to figure it out. We've already done that. So I knew we had to be efficient with our time, right? And efficient with our resources. And so I think for us, that part worked. And I think it's like anything, when you're starting something new or you're trying something new, we're used to, especially people that have been doing this for a while, we're used to doing things a certain way.
Yeah.
And so whenever you're introduced to a format or a structure, software, anything, there's a learning curve, and there is going to be a little time that it takes until it's like riding a bike, until you're not weaving, bobbing, and all over the place. You're actually coasting.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I wouldn't say we're coasting, but I'd say we're in a really good place in regards to being very comfortable, and getting more and more comfortable. And the more comfortable you get, I think the more you strengthen. And then more time for the other things that you want to do and want to work on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So part of what I hear both of you saying is, one, be willing to be willing to get help, be willing to be coached, which also requires being a beginner at some level, being willing to learn and grow, being okay with not knowing what you don't know. And then practice, right? Like anything that we've gotten good at in life requires a repetitive, doing it repeatedly, right? Like we grow and we learn and we get stronger out of doing something consistently over and over and over again. And sometimes our greatest learning is in the mistakes that we make too. So making mistakes along the way is totally fine, right? You probably didn't fill it all out perfectly the first times that you did it, right? But then you learned. Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. I think that's great advice to anybody who's listening or watching, who, is listening to you guys talk about the backlog report and how powerful it's been for you in managing and running your day-to-day operations, giving you more peace of mind, more ease, and more time to focus on other things. That it's a circle that's been very powerful in how you run your business. I think you've given people some great advice about where to begin, how to begin. So one of the other things that you have talked about in terms of the thing that's been the difference, that's made the difference in having you be at this place in your business where you're consistently meeting your goals, exceeding your goals, having more peace of mind, more joy and fun in what you do, is the budgeting process. Now, I know a lot of times people hear the word budget and they're like, oh, I don't want to do budgets because I never meet my goals. Or it's something that they put on a piece of paper, and it used to be it stayed on a shelf, but like now it just sits in a computer and nobody ever looks at it. But there's a different dynamic in how you use and approach budgeting. So can you just talk about how that has served and supported you in a way that, again, wasn't just another thing that you did, but that supported you in getting where you are today, your success?
Well, the budget is very clarifying. It's basically in black and white exactly how much on one column, everything costs, from your lease agreement down to your internet service, your PG&E bill, whatever it is, including your materials, your cost of goods, et cetera, et cetera. And the budget report that Vicky prepared for us lists everything that we spend throughout the year, down to the car wash, et cetera, because it's all money that's going out. So having a budget informs us then what that nut is for 12 months. And from that budget, we know what we have to bring in as revenues to maintain the business, pay our employees well, and have all these other criteria like paying ourselves well, maybe expanding in, paid time, not paid time off, but vacation pay, things like that. That's in the future, et cetera, et cetera. So, they go hand in hand. We've never had a budget prior to working with you. We had an idea,
Right.
right? You can't run a business on an idea.
Yeah.
So those
You're not alone,
projections,
by the way. A lot of people,
Yeah.
they go, I got a number in my head. It's like,
yeah,
Right,
I
right.
think it's this much, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I think we're close, but
But we're not sure. But having a budget is helpful because, for instance, we want to purchase, a couple more vehicles in 2025, for instance. What will it take to do that? How much more revenues would we have to generate, by when to be able to do that? And so that's pretty clarifying, right? Because then it gives us something to work towards. And because we look at the numbers on a monthly basis at the moment, we know if we're meeting our goals and when would be a safe time to purchase those vehicles, for instance, because it's there, it's budgeted essentially. So having a budget has, given me peace of mind. I know what the number is. And so I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to make it up. I don't have to, it's just there. It's very, very clarifying.
yeah, I think again, it's kind of, it works hand in hand with the backlog. But it's again, it's a roadmap. It's clarifying. It helps us to focus on if we're meeting our financial goals. And and that is really important in regards to what our profitability is, as we're doing projects, as well as what our profitability is like for the month, for the quarter, at the end of the year. We are following that and we're tracking it so we can make calculated adjustments, or if something's really not jiving in the budget, we know there's a hole or something's going on, right? So it helps us really
so I want to throw something in here because what you're talking about is like, so Tessa, you were talking about like the first part of it is it helps us clarify like a plan for what we want to do in our business, right? Like, how are we going to pay all the expenses? How are we going to have enough profit to, pay ourselves a really nice salary and invest back into our business, maybe in our teams,
right?
All of that. But part of what you're talking about, Susan, right now, and I think Tessa, you're alluding to this too, is like you look at it every month. So it's not just numbers on a piece of paper that then gets filed away someplace.
No, at the end of the year,
you're actually looking at how am I doing compared to how I said I was going to do. So I'm assuming that's the part that you're talking about where like you can like look up and go, am I on track? Am I off track? What do I need to do differently next? Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Well, it's very clarifying also because you can look at, okay, so we're bringing in maybe the amount of revenue that we wanted to bring in, but what's our profitability, right? So, I mean, and that tells the tale right there. So, how do we need to, tweak things, or are we meeting those goals? Because I think, and we've been there, right? So we're just, really working on that. And it's made a huge difference to be really seeing that in black and white with the numbers and the percentages of, how are we running our business? Are we running lean and profitable? Are we, doing what we need to be doing in regards to, are we charging enough? And all of those things. So that for me, on top of the big picture stuff, that Tessa was talking about, which is huge, that, working with the budget on a micro level, or, monthly has just been a huge eye opener, and also a really helpful strategy, I think, for us in regards to our profitability and how we're doing. What do we need to look at? What do we need to work on? And how are we running our projects? It all gets tied into the numbers and the budget. And the budget, again, is the roadmap. I mean, it's just black and white. It's just numbers, right? And it makes it really easy to understand, because they don't lie, right? I mean, you want to just make a story up about things sometimes, and really the thing about the numbers is it's kind of like, well, you can't fib on that. You can't tell yourself
numbers don't lie. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
a
right?
sobering thing, right? Yeah. And so there's no joking around about it. We can joke about it. Sometimes, we feel like we're not, where we want to be. And those are hard days when we have to look at that and go, okay.
Can you speak to that for a minute? Because again, this is kind of like one of those things that I think people get intimidated by. I'm not comfortable looking at financial statements. I'm not comfortable looking at the numbers. I don't like getting past the numbers, because let's face it, those first few years, the numbers were not showing the results that you want, right? We just talked about the fact that this year is the year that you're like, not only did we meet them, we're exceeding them. And part of what's prompted and sparked this conversation between the three of us was I said, hey, would you come talk about how you did that, right? So the whole part about looking at the numbers month in and month out, can you just speak to how did you have to shift your mindset about that? Or how did you shift your mindset about it from being something that was intimidating or challenging or hard to look at to being something that like what I know about you guys, like you've been willing to lean into it in a way that sometimes clearly was not comfortable. And I think it's true for all of us. Like when we're embarking on engaging with something that we're not comfortable with, we're not familiar with, but also something that we don't necessarily want to always look at.
Yeah.
How did you, like, what did you do? What advice would you have for somebody who was needed to kind of get past that hurdle? Like, what's the mindset that you had that let you lean into it?
Well, I'm just going to say for myself, it's made me a lot more willing to be honest and sober about it. Like, if you don't have something solidly clear to, inform you or guide you, you're kind of working in la la land on some level. I mean, you can
tell yourself any story at that point, right?
You can tell yourself whatever, and sometimes sheer will and the story maybe will get you through, because it has for us a few times, because we have the will and we have the motivation and we're pretty resilient. But after a while, that gets really tiring. I mean, that'll wear you down and wear you out. And it can be discouraging and frustrating. And you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this for a long time. And we do okay, but we're not really where we want to be, where we should be.
Right.
And so I think you don't want to wait until you're just like worn down and tired and beaten. It's like beating a dead horse. If I knew what I know now, I mean, I keep saying this and you can't take it back, but if we would have been doing this 20 years ago, who knows where we would be right now. And even the cost or whatever it is to get the help and to work with you or somebody, believe me, I mean, it's worth it, because the cost of running your business at a deficit or running yourself at a deficit, let's say, is just taxing on your health, on your emotional stability, on, your family life, on your financial life. And so
Right.
in the end, it really, yes, there is a cost to everything, but that's what happens when you up your game. And so I think for me, I go to bed and sleep better at night. I still have, I still worry about things, but not like I did. And I'm just so much more focused and more confident knowing that, well, one, just knowing the numbers, because I know that we're being real, we're being realistic, and I know what I'm going to need to do to get to the next level. So we, believe me, used to have meltdowns, and we would find every reason to get in an argument or to, like, make that conversation
Right.
not happen, and
Yeah.
blame each other for something. And there was all kinds of convenient ways to avoid those numbers. And when I saw your spreadsheet the first time, I was like, ooh, ooh, that's going to be a job to get my head around. And then after we did it, I mean, I loved it. Like right now, like I get excited about looking at the numbers.
Yes.
Even if I know we might not be where we want to be, I'm like ready for it, because then it motivates me. It motivates me to like get on it, to get where we need to go. And why isn't it working, and what's not working about it? I'd rather know that and know we're working on the things we actually putting energy in the places where we need to put the energy, because I know that when we put the energy out there, it expands, and that's not a joke.
Well, so it's that thing of, if you have more clarity, we have more confidence, and when we have more confidence, we can take more powerful actions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So true, Vicki. Yeah.
Yeah. Tessa, so what would you add to that? Just in terms of like, what did you have to do to get beyond that, like, I don't know, intimidation or the resistance of it, or any advice that you would have for somebody? Like, what was the thing that let you lean into doing the whole budgeting, looking at the numbers every month process? How'd you get past it? What was the driver for you?
Oh. Gosh, I think it happened incrementally over a period of a few years. Prior to working with you, Susan and I both worked with another coach, but it was only on occasion. And we had like a workshop at the end of the year for 2 days that was all about looking at the accomplishments of the year we were in, and, planning ahead for the next year. But it was not on a financial level. It was more about an emotional, psychological, level,
Personal barriers.
Yeah, personal
barriers. Yeah.
So I have to say that really contributed to, you know, uh, crossing those barriers within my own self, you know, um, thinking that, going from thinking that I did not have value to thinking, wow, I'm valuable, not just to myself, my family, my friends, my relationships, but, in every aspect of my life, which then extended to my business. So that was, I'm valuable to my team, to my clients, to my work, etc., etc. So fast forward to a moment in one of those workshops where we met a woman who had this, what was it called, Susan?
It was an exercise on how to make a decision.
Oh, this decision-making exercise.
Okay.
It was one of those things. It was very, very simple. And you gave a number.
You scored
Right.
yourself.
It was very, very simple, right? And so Susan and I had been back and forth about expanding our business physically into the space that we're in now. We went from a home office and, a little workshop to 3,000 square feet of space. That decision-making process, we scored one day out of like the moment when you feel really elevated. You've just come out of a workshop and everything's beautiful and you're on top of the world. But
And we've
what
been working with Vicky too, right?
yeah, in one of your group workshops.
Yeah.
So the culmination of all of that was going, you know what? This is a no-brainer. We need to expand physically out of the space that we're in. That expansion of that physical moment really sort of was like a defining moment for me as well, because it was a barrier that I crossed within myself. To expand spatially meant that I expanded internally, if that makes any sense.
It
And
does.
so I have just been, working on that, because when you have an accomplishment, and that was a big accomplishment for me personally, to say, we can afford this. We can afford a 5-year lease for 3,000 square feet, right? And it hasn't even from day one been an issue. It was just like, this is what we got to do. We'll figure it out. We are smart, we're talented, we will make it all happen. So that for me was the first barrier I crossed. And then working with you and getting our budget together, really honing it down and saying, okay, you always say the way to expand your business is 2 ways: either increase revenues or, decrease costs. So that clicked in a big, big way. So the budget really became for me one of those things as well, where I had to look at each line item and go, okay, does this make sense? Is this going to return our investment if we spend this much money? Each place, in even just our basic services here, is there another company that I could get the same service for half the price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that really was a big hurdle to cross. And so continuing to work with you has really sort of been incredible, because that foundation was laid. And, to speak to Susan's point, when you focus on something, right? If you focus on what's positive, more comes your way. If you focus on things that are small and petty and minuscule, and we as human beings are so comfortable with sometimes just doing the same thing over and over and over and over and expecting a different result. I can say I was one of those people. I am not that person anymore, because I think just having these successes, like meeting our goal and exceeding our goal, lets me know that all the work that I'm putting in, not just in my business, but in my personal growth, has really allowed these successes.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to, continuing to grow. And sometimes it's not easy, but I'm here for the challenge.
Yeah. So part of what I hear both of you saying is that part of the beginning, right? Part of the getting beyond that like limitation or what holds you back, or the focusing on what's not possible, or just the operating from the worry as opposed to being intentional, which I hear is part of what's really shifted for both of you, is deciding, like, right? Choosing. I hear both of you saying that there was this moment when you chose to focus on, all right, this isn't necessarily in my wheelhouse. This isn't necessarily comfortable. This isn't something that we've done. And what would it take? Asking a different question, like, how can we? And deciding, like, just like that mindset of deciding that's what I'm going to do. And then figuring out, how can I do it? How can I get that done? And as you've both been talking, it's like that whole ability to be able to have more clarity gives you more confidence to take those actions. And part of that clarity, as I'm also listening, came from, hey, when we put the numbers on a piece of paper and we figured it out and we started looking at our results consistently, again, you're sort of building muscle memory in managing by the data, by the numbers, which is, Susan, you said, like, don't lie, right? So it starts to give us more confidence to have that ability to know where you are, as opposed to just operating right out of that like worry and concern. Is it all going to turn out right?
I really think, Vicki, you know, that removing the emotional element of operating, you know, is such a big deal, because I think what happens is we tend to ignore our own voice, you know, ignore a lot of the things that intuitively and internally, you know, we have this intuition about things. We know probably what we should be doing. We just don't always know how to get there, right? And
Yep.
so I think even if you're at a place in your business where you feel like you're reaching out, or you need the help, or you need the guidance and the structure of getting, you know, to the next level.
Right.
I think that is such a big deal, and I
Yeah.
would encourage anybody to not ignore it, to not
Yeah.
minimize it. That's the voice inside of you that's saying, go for it. You know, and get whatever you need to be able to level up. And that requires some work. And I think what you have always encouraged is just doing, you know, do one thing. Just do one thing, because sometimes it gets overwhelming, all the different things we could be doing. Do one thing. And that's what we did. We really focused on the numbers, the budget, the backlog, getting organized in regards to just what we were bringing in and what was going out. Just those basic things. Just get comfortable with that. And that was huge for us. And it really changed the game. I mean, we're looking at all kinds of other things now. Where do we focus next? And what are we thinking we need to do next?
Right.
But we're working, we have a foundation, I feel, that's really different, that's really supporting where we are and where we want to go. But taking that emotional charge and trigger by using these tools that are really giving you, you know, the real deal, it just, that's a game changer. That is a total game changer.
Right. And
Totally appreciate that. Go ahead, Tess.
And I have shared with other contractors, you know, our experience, and I think it's noticeable, our level of comfort now with our business, how we project that out. And I was talking to somebody a few months ago, and I mentioned, you know, what we were doing, and the first thing was, well, how much does it cost? So I said, well, talk to Vicki, because, you know, I'm sure she has different relationships depending on what your needs are, and so on and so forth. And he goes, well, I don't think I can afford it. But I know that as a contractor, he has a team of 10 employees out in the field every day. And I do know that here in San Francisco, if 10 employees are operating as a loss, even for one day, that might probably more than pay for a consultation or an opportunity to work with you.
For sure. For sure.
Well,
A good coach is always going to make you way more money than you're ever going to
right.
spend on them.
I know, it's
Exactly.
like, I always want to say, okay, you can't afford it, but you can't afford not
You
to
can't not afford it. Yeah.
right now. This is the deal, right? You can't
Yeah,
afford
it's that whole thing of like investing, understanding that when you invest in the right way in your business, in somebody who can help you fill the gaps where you have gaps in your ability to be able to get to the next level, it is huge, because that's going to give you a greater return than whatever the investment is. And what I'll contend too is that sometimes it's just really that when you really get down to it, is that sometimes people aren't ready. And I
That's
think
true.
that the not ready sometimes is based on, you know, some, you know, negative self chatter that goes on between people's two ears of they don't think that they can, they don't think that they're capable, they're not smart enough, I don't know math, whatever, you know, whatever that story is. I think a lot of times that's actually what's at the root of what stops us from engaging. We don't think that we can do it. We don't think that we have it in us. And I think that one of the things that you guys got clear on that even allowed me to be able to support you in the way that I have is that you were clear about you wanted to make a change and you were willing to do that. Like that you wanted to,
Yes,
you had the desire and you were clear about what that, like you didn't know how it was going to look, you didn't know how you were going to
right,
get there, but you
right.
had the desire and the drive to grow and to get to the next level in your business. And I think that has to, that, of all of this, like, has to come first, whether you're hiring a coach, whether you're doing a backlog report, whether you're doing a budget, like there
yes.
has to be that willingness to go, okay, I got it, and I can trust that that's going to be the next thing. And, so part, and then that comes back down to, do we trust ourselves, right? So
Well,
sometimes
that's
I
it.
think that's really what
That-
it is. We don't trust
That's it.
ourselves.
I think that's huge. That's a big part of it. And when I say it takes the emotional kind of charge out of it, that is exactly what I mean by the emotional charge. Because when I say emotional charge, I'm talking about the little monkey in your brain that's telling you, see, you really can't do this, or you're just never going to get to the next place, or can we do the doubt and questioning yourself. And when you start to get tired of doing something, one way and having to work twice as hard to get there, I think that part of it becomes clear. And I think really it's the self-doubt and the chatter that goes on when that starts to seep in, that you
Yeah.
start to let it take hold. And I think mindset, again, it's the mindset. It's this is a huge part of the transition for both, I think, Tess and I, if I
Yes,
can say so,
yes,
is as we are doing the work and we start to see the change. And it took a while to just really,
Mhm.
in a real transactional way, see the change, but we were seeing it. We were feeling more confident. We were building the muscle. And once we started doing that and putting it in motion, that we started to feel differently, and our mindset had already been in the process of changing, because we knew we had to listen to that voice that was saying, you have to do this. You have to
Yeah.
do this because you don't want to keep doing what you've been doing.
yeah,
And it's a leap of faith. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
It's trust and faith, and then
Mhm.
trust your instincts, trust your
Yeah.
intuition, and then do the work. I mean, you
Well,
have to,
sorry.
no, it's just you have to do those actionable things.
yes,
Otherwise, you don't get there, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, I commend both of you for having the courage, for being willing to begin, to be willing to be coached, to be willing to have a different set of practices around how you've done your business and how you do your business. It has been a great joy for me to watch how you've grown and evolved and how you're building the business and the life that you desire. And I love that you both have more peace of mind, more time off, more fun in what you're doing, which is really like what it's all about in the end. And thank you. Thank you so much for being willing to come on the show and share your story. Thank you for your honesty, your authenticity, and for helping somebody else who is listening to this who's like, that's what I needed to hear today. Like, because I think our
yes,
stories are so powerful as a way of being able to understand we have this shared humanity and that we don't necessarily wake up one day and it's all fixed and all great. Like we have to go through sometimes the struggles to get to the other side, and that we also need to at some point have faith in ourselves, trust ourselves, be willing to begin, be willing to be a beginner. And
Absolutely.
that takes courage. And so, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story. And yeah, and thanks for letting me be on this journey with you. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Vicki, and we thank you every day. I mean, I thank you that you're here in our lives, and that we have the courage to just pull the trigger and say we're doing this, and we're
yes,
take the leap. and it's been a wonderful journey and a wonderful relationship, and I look forward to continuing to keep it going, because we're not there yet, but we're getting
Well on our way.
We're on our way. Yeah.
You guys have done awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Susan and Tessa, and that you took away something that will help you in your business. If you're interested in learning more about our services, please feel free to check out the contractorscollective.com. It is a great program that I run, that's peer group program with contractors, that's all about helping you grow, thrive, and prosper in your business and be able to cause some of those kind of results like Susan and Tessa were sharing about their business as well. And make sure to subscribe or follow me by clicking on the button below. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Profit Builder Unscripted.